Okay, so we are going to go into the 6th and 9th commandments, and as a teacher, this is probably one of the most awkward classes we'll go through out of all of them, but it must be taught, and we're just going to go into God's plan for human sexuality. In many ways, the topics that I'll bring up, not all of our Christian brothers and sisters believe what we do as Catholics, but this has always been taught since the beginning of Christianity. And really, the word chastity, I believe, did not exist until Christ came. I mean, this is a virtue that did not exist before our Lord came. There was ideas of abstinence and stuff like that, but the virtue of chastity did not exist until Jesus Christ came. He came to renew marriage and also God's plan for human sexuality. And all that being said, if you look at a lot of our social problems and the breakdown of families, and many of the things that are debated on a public, in the public, and especially now in courthouses and in the government, it's over issues of human sexuality. Okay, so that being said, let's start. We're going to do the 6th and 9th commandments together. Usually we put them together because they're similar commandments, and we're going to look at them. Now, the 6th commandment is simply, thou shalt not commit adultery. I think most people know what that means, is not to have conjugal relations with people that are not your spouse. And the second is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Now, on the outset, it would seem like, oh, well, I'm doing pretty well with that. But when you go deeper, it's much deeper than that. It's not just a matter of, not cheating on your spouse, but it's living the virtue of chastity. St. Josemaria says there is a need for a crusade of manliness and purity to counterattack and nullify the savage work of those who think that man is a beast and that crusade is your work. And Fulton Sheen said this: sex divorced from love, instead of raising man by taking him away from himself, drags him down to the hall of mirrors where he is always confronted with self. Sex does not care about the person but about the act. The fig leaf, which once was put over the secret parts of man and woman in sculpture, is now put over the face. The person does not matter. And so what he's saying is, when you divorce sex from love, true love, it becomes sinful. And that's what lust essentially is. Now, first off, what is chastity? All right, chastity is simply this. It's not just saying sex, no. A lot of times people look at it as, well, I can't have sex until marriage, and then I can do whatever I want. Or that attitude is, I just have to. But it's much deeper. And Saint Cyprian says this: chastity is a virtuous mind added to watchfulness over the body. In other words, it's working on having pure thoughts and living sexuality according to God's plan. Okay, so it's not just our bodies, but our minds, and living, as St. Paul says, as a temple of the Holy Spirit. All right, now, first off, we have to look at what is the purpose of sex. And when people argue about, well, I think that, why can't they have gay marriage, and why can't people use birth control, and why can't, if I love someone, I can't sleep with them, and all these sort of arguments that come up. Well, people have to step back and ask the question, what is the purpose of sex? I mean, just simply put, what is it? The purpose of sex is twofold. Not just one, remember, says we'll have babies. Fine, but it's twofold. It's for procreation and also what? Bonding. Okay, great. All right, here's okay, so you're learning something. Okay, great. It's for unity and procreation. Okay, so it's supposed to, in the plan of God, sexuality is made between a man and a woman, and we see that in the book of Genesis. He said, it is not good for man to be alone, let us make a suitable helpmate for them. And we also see that the two became one flesh, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Right? Be fruitful and multiply. And so God gave one of the greatest pleasure ever to the sexual act. Okay, Father Sam, in his talk on Saturday, he talked about gluttony, and he said, if God took away all pleasure from food, people would probably stop eating. Now, I don't know if that's completely true, But I believe if God took away the pleasure from sex, no one would do it. And what's happened is everyone has sort of diluted sex into simply what it does or gives for a person, and rather what it really is. And so it's been really diluted in our culture to be almost meaningless. Okay? And we see that in what's called now the hookup culture. The friends without benefits, which is rampant in high schools, the promiscuity, homosexual activity, pornography, all these other things. And so anytime the sexual act is not about bonding or babies, if you divide the two, it's disordered. It's out of the way that God planned it to be. Okay, so you have to put that into reference, that the purpose of sexuality is for bonding and it's for babies. If you know a little bit about science and sexuality too, a lot of people, they don't do any kind of studies on this, but there's chemicals in the body that God made for bonding. So, in other words, a woman, the first time she has relations with a man, a chemical goes off in her body that makes her attached to that man. Do you ever see a girl in an abusive relationship? Well, why do you think that is? Well, if she lost her virginity to that guy, God made the body to want to cling to that person. He made the sexual act to have a bonding purpose, but also it has a procreative purpose, which the sexual act obviously leads and can lead to children. That's the way God provided. Okay, so that being said, we have to go into, I know this is where it gets really uncomfortable, but we'll just slide through it, okay? All right, first, all right, what is lust? Lust is, a simple definition of lust is when you objectify a person, okay, and you're looking at the person as an object of pleasure and not a person as a whole. Okay, so remember that the human sexual act is supposed to be, in God's eyes, a total gift of self, a love that a person shows, especially a man to his wife, and the wife receives his love. And it's supposed to be an act of giving, but when you take instead of give, so to speak, it becomes selfish. Okay? So anything where you begin to objectify a person and you're looking at them as an object, we say objectifying a person, we're falling into the realm of lust. Okay? Now where do we see that in the Bible? In Genesis. Remember, what was the first negative thing that happened to man and woman when they sinned? They realized what? They were naked. So all of a sudden, and they covered themselves with fig leaves. Now, why did they do that? Well, there's John Paul II explained on a negative note. All of a sudden, they're like, why am I looking at you this way? And the capacity just to love was diminished. And man and woman, for the first time, felt shame, but also this lust in their heart. And every human person has this. It's part of the original sin. Okay? And so they covered themselves because they realized they did not want to be objectified by the other person, even their own spouse. Right? And so that's what essentially lust is. Now that leads to all the other sins of against the sixth commandment. All right? Here we go. All right, so the first one is masturbation. Okay, all right, I said the word. It is probably, I've never preached that on a Sunday homily, and I once asked my father, he says, please don't say that word from the pulpit. It's just an embarrassing word. But, all right, so what is the problem with masturbation? Well, let's look at it once again in context. That it is not unitive, okay, and it's definitely not procreative, and it's an act of selfishness. Okay, it's especially if someone's doing this in marriage, it takes away that power to love and this energy that should be put upon the spouse, and it's using it for oneself. Now, C.S. Lewis had a quote on this, and it's very interesting. C.S. Lewis was not a Catholic. He's a Christian, and he said this: "For me, the real evil of masturbation would be that it takes an appetite which in lawful use leads the individual out of himself to complete and correct his own personality and that of another, and turns it back, sends the man back into the prison of himself, there to keep a harem of imaginary brides. And it says, and this harem, once admitted, works against his ever getting out and really uniting himself with a real woman. Okay, what he's saying there is that it lessens a man or woman's capacity to love another person because they're focused on what? Self. Okay? So, and now, sometimes teenagers will go through a period where they struggle with this. The church realized that habit and, growing up could mitigate the moral responsibility of someone if they're growing up. But still, the church teaches that it is a grave sin. Okay? And masturbation is a grave sin. All right? Once again, because it divides, it's not unitive, it's not procreative. Now, what about fornication? Now, I don't know, that word is not used in any social circles anymore. Does any of you hear that word ever? Okay, how many here in the room have ever heard the word fornication? Okay, how many have never heard it? Okay, okay. Are you a millennial? Okay. All right. Yeah, okay. So, all right. Fornication. This used to be, fornication was a word. It essentially it's actually where the F word comes from, but I don't want to say that on camera, but it's an acronym for, anyway, well, do your own research on that. But fornication is basically, it's premarital sex. All right, now, the question I get a lot of times from young people, if I'm doing spiritual direction or things like this, people, you kind of, how you doing? And let's say they've begun to enter into a sexual relationship, and you say, well, are you sexually acting? Like, yeah, and then, do you know that's wrong? And they're like, kind of. Okay. And so the question is, you have to explain to them, well, why is premarital relations, why is it wrong? Okay, now St. Thomas Aquinas simply addresses it in this way in what's called the Summa Theologica. He says that it is unjust for the unborn baby that could come from that action. Okay, and so he's saying essentially a couple is setting themselves up for the possibility of bringing a child into the world without a proper covenant or a marriage that would make it easy for them to raise a child. Okay, and so a lot of times when you speak to a young person, or maybe not so young, and you ask them, well, would you stay with this person forever? I don't know. Okay, would you have a baby with this person? No. Okay, so why are you having sex with that person? That's a good point. So in other words, if you use the logic of reason, a lot of people, they don't think about the fact that this could lead to a child, and it's meant to, but you're setting yourself for a failure to take care of that child appropriately, okay? But also, there's not, what a couple is saying if they're not married is, they're saying something with their bodies that's not necessarily true, okay? Because the conjugal act essentially says that I want to be completely with you, I will take responsibility for you, and I will deal with all your emotions, I will deal with everything that comes with you, the good or bad, till death do us part. Now how many young people are thinking that way? 0. Okay? Alright, moving on. Pornography. Pornography, unfortunately, has become an epidemic in the United States of America. It is the fastest growing addiction, and I would say it is the biggest addiction today in the world. The internet was a beautiful thing, but Satan has definitely used it to his advantage. I want to throw out some statistics out here. Every second, this is the United States of America, 28,258 users are watching pornography on the internet. Every second, $3,075.64 is being spent on pornography on the internet. Every second, 372 people are typing the word adult into search engines. And 40 million American people regularly visit porn sites. All right? And the biggest, actually the biggest users, according to statistics, of pornography, unfortunately, are children and teenagers between the ages of 12 and 17, which is a huge problem. And that's why I always sort of caution parents to be very careful of monitoring the iPhones, iPads, and so forth. A lot of times, children will innocently come across a site, and then out of curiosity go back to the site, and then end up getting into a very fatal habit. You see? And a lot of times that's how it happens. They accidentally come across it, and then they keep going back to it. There's a lot of great stuff out there. There's technology getting better to block these things. And if you need some suggestions, I have a whole list of things I can email you about how to safeguard your technological devices. And then another sad thing is, search engines get 116,000 queries every day related to child pornography. That's 116,000. Okay, so we have, once again, it's a very sort of sick culture we live in. Okay, but why is it wrong? I mean, I think people, if you step back, you realize, well, it's the ultimate objectification of a human person. Okay, and the way I explain it to the 8th graders is essentially this. Unfortunately, they're going to get this talk next week. They don't know. We break up the boys and the girls, and the girls actually are much more comfortable with this. The guys are like just squirming. You know, they're like, we hate this class. But I explain to them is imagine for a moment, you know, you're at work or you're in a situation, and you know someone shows you the phone. And there is an indecent picture of your sister on that phone. I asked the guys, what would you do? And they all say, I would punch him in the face. I said, good answer. All right, but what I tell them is, whatever picture's on there is someone's baby girl, and someone's sister, and someone's family member, someone's cousin. And so really, in this poor woman, how she got into that situation, God only knows, but she's being objectified by millions of men. You see, so it's a huge problem. I think sometimes just, you know, stepping back and saying, what is really happening here? Okay, moving on. Prostitution, I don't think we need to go into that. I think everyone's, oh, cool. Okay, good, excellent. All right, anyone against that? Or, okay, good, everyone's, no, it's wrong, okay. Rape, obviously, I think everyone across the board, whether Catholic or not Catholic, agree that that's wrong. So I don't think that is. Okay, here we go. Homosexuality. All right, now notice I put here homosexual acts. And I think, too, this is where you need to pull out your catechisms, because I want you to read verbatim, what the church teaches on the issue of homosexuality. All right. Now, it's really easy to remember this. It's the prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7 is the, I heard that on a retreat once because they were teaching us how to preach about this. He's remember the prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7. So I never forgot this. And if you go to 2, 3, 5, 7, this is the church's teaching on homosexuality. And I just want to go through it and pick it apart so that you're able to defend the church's teaching and explain to people that are pro-gay marriage and everything else, why the church says that homosexual actions are wrong. Okay, so 2357 simply says this. Homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction toward persons of the same sex. I think everyone understands that. It has taken a great variety of forms through the centuries and in different cultures. It's always existed. Its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained. Okay, now, I just want to make a point here. Just food for thought to think about. Until 1974, homosexuality was considered a psychological disorder. And then a lot of people forced the the psychologists to change that, to say that it was sort of just a natural thing for certain people. Now notice, in the psychological world, it was used to be considered a disorder and somewhat of a mental illness. Okay? Now, and then the area of psychology pushed that to the side. The church does not say, we don't know why certain people struggle with this, whether you're born this way or it is nurtured. That's more for science. But according to science now, a lot of psychologists say that it's not something you're born with, but it's nurtured. And you probably remember, maybe there's some time ago, there was this thing that came called the gay gene, or the homosexual gene. The guy who came out with that retracted and said, it doesn't exist. Okay? Which actually gives hope to people that they possibly, the church doesn't say you have to be cured, a person can be cured from this if they suffer with same-sex attractions. Right? So it's good to know some of like the pressure and the what's being said, and then what's really the truth behind it all. Okay, but the church doesn't go like why someone struggles. It basically says, what do you do with it if a person has same-sex attractions? Let's go on. So 2, 3, 5, 7, going back to my catechism. Hold on. Okay, it says this. Basing itself on sacred scripture, the Bible, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They weren't meant to be that way. Okay? They are contrary to the natural law, and they close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, effective, and sexual complementarity, and under no circumstances can they be approved. Okay? Under no circumstance can they be approved. Now let's move on. But on the flip side, 2, 3, 5, 8, go down a couple, it says this. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. They must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity, and every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. And these persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and if they are Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross, the difficulties they encounter from their condition. Okay, so what are people with same-sex attraction are called to live heroic lives of what? Chastity. Okay? Now, so kind of step back a little bit and look at how teenagers approach the whole issue of homosexuality. Father Sam was telling me at his youth group, he had a bunch of kids together, and he showed this video to them, and it basically was a kind of a kiddie version of trying to teach kids at a very elementary level, like this is wrong without being graphic, okay? So they basically had so they start off and there's little kids, and they're 7 or 8 years old, look, there's 2 daddies, and all the kids go, ew, so it was and then when they got to 17-year-olds, they're oh, isn't that cute? There was a huge transition in the way they thought by the time they became teenagers. And basically the whole video sort of showed how the influence of the media has really taken the minds and hearts of kids to make homosexual relations look normal and as a viable lifestyle. Okay? And I think it's one of the problems is you go to a public school, and if I said this in the classroom at the morning announcements, they crucify me. Right? And even in Canada, I know it's a true story, there's a priest that preached this from the pulpit. He was arrested and thrown in jail saying that homosexual action are a sin. So there's already persecution happening on this level. Okay? But notice that we're not uncompassionate to people that struggle with this situation, but if we have to tell, in a sense that if it's not right or holy, how can we as a church say that it is acceptable? We can't. But we have a culture that's really pushing this hard upon society and upon your children. So much so that most Disney movies have what? A token. It's a subliminal message. And your kids are getting consistently from the media. Okay? And it's very strong. And I just want you to know this. Okay, and then, it's just, and the thing is, it's one of those tough things that I think, it's hard in this culture where, people, they feel, I think the culture is such that they believe that if they're not having a sexual life, that they can't be happy. And so when I have someone come to my office and tell me that, I'm like, oh, how about priests? How about nuns? How about widowers or widows or someone whose spouses are sick? Does that not make them happy? But in society, the basic gist is this: if you don't have a thriving sexual life, you can't live happiness, which isn't necessarily true. You see? So, does everyone understand the teaching on homosexuality? Okay? And once again, let's go back to the principles. It's not authentic bonding, and it's also not what? Well, it can't procreate children. Once again, it's not God's plan. There's a great video. There's actually, if you know someone who is out of the church, or someone that's against the church, because there's a great video I have. It's a 30-minute video, which, and this happens a lot. Like I'll get one time, unfortunately, I got an email from a guy, and he's like, "Father, I was at one of your funerals. I was so inspired by what you said, and I want to come back to the church." And I was like, "Praise God." And then he says, "But there's one problem." And I kind of knew where this is going to go, and as I kept reading the email, he's like, I'm in an active homosexual lifestyle, or I'm married and I'm in a gay marriage. So I simply replied, I said, "You are welcome to the church. However," I said, could you abstain from sexual relations if you come back to the church?" And that was the last email I got. And but I can't tell them, in a sense, like anyone else, I can't say, of course they're welcome. But you have to abstain from these types of relations if you're going to be in full communion with the Catholic Church. Okay? It's just, just like anything else. So, and I always told him, and I sent him the video, and I don't know, hopefully he watched it, and I prayed for the guy, but it's just one of those things. People find it very difficult to get out of that lifestyle, but there is a friend of mine, Father Paul Scalia. He runs a group called Courage. And Courage is a Catholic group that helps homosexual men and homosexual women, are separate, to live chastely with their struggles. And it's very successful. He pulls them out of this lifestyle, and with good catechesis, teaching, and prayer, they live happy, holy lives. And that's where the church is. We're just trying to help these men and women to live chastity. The Center for Disease Control says one of the most dangerous forms or cause of disease is sexual relations between same-sex couples. Leads to many, many types of terrible diseases, but you're not going to read that in the Washington Post. So we love these people, but we need to help them not to live that particular lifestyle. Okay? So the inclination is not a sin, it's what they do with it. Do you see? Okay? We don't judge them for their attractions in this. Okay? Everyone has attractions. But you can't act on every attraction if you're heterosexual, right? All right, so the same thing. Okay, let's move on. Okay, all right. Well, this is fun. Okay. Oh boy, Lord, get me through this. All right. We did speak about this, in the marriage class, but contraception falls into a violation of the Sixth Commandment, and so does sterilization. Which sterilization actually is a violation of the Fifth Commandment. I failed to mention it last week because it's destroying a healthy organ. Okay, if someone confesses it, they're forgiven. Okay, move on. But contraception, sterilization. Why is it sinful? Okay, once again, it is taking the one part of the act and dividing it from the other part. So it's diluting sexuality merely into a unitive act but it's divorcing what? The procreative aspect of the sexual act. And I think one of the reasons we're losing the gay marriage war is essentially this, that most Americans are not practicing, in a sense, sex that's godly. If it's true that 90% of couples are using contraception and the sexual act is merely a unitive act, how can they tell someone else that they can't do it either? Do you see the connection? And so I think if there's been this splinter, now the church was always against, all the way back since the beginning, and it was against contraception, and then the first major break happened with the Episcopal Church, and what was called the Lambeth Conference, and it was, I believe that was in Canada, and it was the first time where the Canadian bishops, pray for Canada, where the Canadian bishops basically said, under certain circumstances, a couple may resort to contraception, which basically the floodgates opened and this, everyone used it and said it's not a sin in the Episcopal Church. And then every other Christian church followed suit except for the Roman Catholics. And then some of you, none of you are old enough to remember this, in 1968, the famous encyclical, what came out? Humana Vitae. Okay, does everyone know what that is? It's called, and I really think you should read that document, it's beautiful, on human life. And Paul VI, he came out with this document, and there was actually a group of people that were studying this issue, and they basically were going to tell the Pope, they had it already, all these letters and documents, they said, we believe that we should follow suit with all the other Christian churches, we should let couples use contraception, let them use their conscience, we can't tell them, they can't have, whatever the situation. And Paul VI, basically, after prayerfully praying over it, came out with this document, and it was like an explosion. And it was very poorly received, unfortunately, by many priests and many bishops. And in this diocese, back in the 1960s and late 70s, there were about 70 priests that signed a letter saying, we are not going to obey the Holy Father on this, and we're not going to preach it either. So, the bishop at the time, he kicked all those priests out, but then Paul VI, being the Pope, he's very compassionate, he said let them back in. And I think what happened is, even though the 70 priests did not preach it, when someone went to the confessional, they slipped in what? Use your conscience. And I think what they did is they destroyed the faith of many, many people, rather than encourage them, to use lawful methods. Now, the church does not say a couple has to have as many kids as biologically possible. We do say that a large family is something that should be celebrated. But my sister called me today and she was all upset because the guys at work are razzing them because she's pregnant with her 8th kid. And they're all making fun of them. And they're all Christian. And I just thought, where's the support? Where's the love? Hey man, congratulations. But it's all these jokes, and he just had it. And I think and this doesn't just exist in these non-Christian churches. It also, that attitude exists in the Catholic Church. Right? It just has to stop because, they're supposed to be very generous with life, and they're going to change society. And we just have to see that. Now, natural family planning essentially says this, and we have a team of girls in this parish that will teach couples how to use it. It essentially uses the natural rhythm of the woman's body and to show you when you are most likely to conceive, and then you can choose to abstain for those 4 or 5 days and go back to normal relations, and that's totally fine. The difference is you're not destroying the meaning of human sexuality in the action itself. And you're respecting both the bonding and the procreative aspect of it by abstaining and going back to it. Are you going to get pregnant on the infertile times? Most likely not, but you're still respecting what it means, as opposed to destroying the true meaning of it. Okay? All right. Now we got to turn This is heavy, isn't it? All right, here we go. All right, so now another thing too here is, and this has only existed in the last, I guess, 25 years, 30 years, more or less. Now it's very, very common. I heard somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, there was a class from Riken High School where 70% of the girls experiment or use in vitro fertilization as a method of conceiving children in a Catholic school. Now, the reason is they were never taught about what IVF is and why the church is against it. Now, once again, we have to look at it from the perspective of human sexuality. Now, on one side, we have a culture that's having sex without respecting procreation, but now we have this new phenomenon, which we're having babies without what? Without sex. Pope Benedict, in one of his books, he said that we have this brave new world where we have sex without babies and babies without sex. Interesting. Now, why is in vitro fertilization wrong? Well, first off, it's in terms of, even though it can be done, the question is this ought to be done. Just because we have the scientific means to form a child in a petri dish, and that's what in vitro means. It means in glass, in vitro fertilization. And essentially what it does, they take the man's seed, the woman's eggs, they extract them from the body, once again with the man in an immoral way, put them in a petri dish, and they form embryos. Now usually how many embryos are formed? About 7, 8 embryos. And then what happens is that they take the embryos and they classify them into 3 particular categories, A, B, and C. A being your sort of smart, athletic, whatever type of genetic makeup. B being your kind of, okay, middle of the road, and then C, well, we're not sure where this one's going, okay, type of embryos. And they can actually classify it by scientifically looking at the genetic makeup of the embryo. Which one gets to go to mommy? A, but in that process, there's only a 30% chance that the embryo lives to make it successfully in the womb of the mother. Which means there's a 7 out of 10 chance that the embryo will what? Die. And then what happens to the other ones is they've been put on ice or they've been discarded. An embryo is a human life, and right now we have this huge problem where we have about 100,000 embryos on ice, and the Vatican has no idea what to do with them. It's just a problem. Now, we thought, well, maybe we can allow mothers to adopt them, but then the problem was what? Well, what happens if the embryos die? Then we thought, well, what if we baptize them? Like, well, that's not going to work either. So, essentially, I don't know, this is a problem that we never want to have. And this is where embryonic stem cell research comes in. They are produced from IVF labs, okay? So, now, can a woman receive fertility treatment? Yes, if it naturally aids her to conceive naturally in her own body, like, fertility treatment shots and stuff like totally fine. But outside of the womb and in a sort of artificial way is not acceptable in the Catholic Church. Okay? All right. Separation from spouses, divorce is we talked about adultery, and I mentioned this in my homily on Sunday. Is that marriage is forever if you got married in the Catholic Church. If a person leaves their spouse and marries another without it being recognized as, or without having the church recognize that possibly that first marriage was not valid, it commits adultery. Okay, and that's why couples find themselves maybe not able to go to communion. But like I said, as I'm inviting so many couples to come to see if that first marriage might have been invalid. And like I said, I've done close to 70 to 100 of these cases in my priesthood, and I've blessed that many that were outside the church to come in my 12 years as a priest. That's all it is telling them to come talk to me. Okay, so just to get someone out of that situation. All right, how much time do we have?
It's 15 minutes.
It was like, we're out of time, right? Okay. All right. So just a couple of. All right. So in this, that's sort of all the negative side. How do you live purity? Now, once again, purity means to have a pure mind and a pure heart, pure body. All right. Write this down. I want you to look this up. 2340 in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. 2340. And it says this, that whoever wants to remain faithful to his baptismal promises and resist temptations will want to adopt the means for doing so. Now this is what we're going to break down. Self-knowledge, practice of exegesis, adapted to the situation that confronts him, obedience to God's commandments, exercising the moral virtues, and fidelity to prayer. Okay, first, self-knowledge. Self-knowledge basically means this, is that, temptations against purity to go, there's always, in the human person, there's always this inclination to lust, and it can be stronger and less strong at different ages, or depending on your psychological makeup. Some people are different. For most people, go through a series where it's a struggle. And the basic thing is to know yourself is, when is it bad, and a lot of times sins against purity are when you're bored, lonely, angry, stressed, or tired. The second thing it says here is practice of ascesis. And what this means is that the church has always asked, if people want to live sexual purity, you actually have to practice self-denial outside of that. In other words, if we're not disciplined on things like eating, drinking, sleeping, working, well, the battle to live purity will not really fall into place, so to speak. Jesus says, whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself. And St. Jose Maria says, the miracle of purity has prayer and mortification as its 2 points. So what are some examples of this? A lot of times sexual sins are committed when someone's drunk. Okay? So in a sense not to drink too much, especially at parties and stuff like that. The other thing is, it's interesting, they say that overeating is the forerunner to impurity. So in a sense that there's a discipline, with food, it's easier to live chastity. So it's just, and also hard work. Like just focusing on like what you're supposed to do can keep the mind where it should be. The second thing it says, exercise the moral virtues. Now the moral virtues are essentially this. Prudence, okay, is the one moral virtue I think that the church is speaking about. Well, what is prudence? It means thinking before you act. Okay? I tell this story, I told this on a women's retreat. My mother, growing up, she was Irish, she is Irish, right? And in the Irish, there's only one commandment, it's the sixth commandment. Okay? That's just like, we can watch war movies and murder, but if there's one, essential scene, it's out of the house. And my mom would she was like a dictator when it came to movies, and you couldn't get a movie in there that had anything inappropriate, so to speak. And there was a rule in my house is that we could not watch a rated R movie. And my best friend of mine in 6th or 7th grade, somehow we convinced Mom and his mom to let us go. But there was one condition, is that Mrs. Coyne had to go with us. And so me and Brian are like, I don't know, we're like, kind of like doing a little back office, negotiation. Is it worth it? And they're like, all right, we'll bring Mom. What's the worst that can happen? So we're watching this movie. It's a great movie, but then all of a sudden there was a scene, and it got a little steamy, so to speak. And all of a sudden we noticed that Mrs. Quinn was doing something with her hands. And I was like, what is she doing with her hands? And all of a sudden this blanket went up, and she holds it up, and she covers it over me and Brian and everyone behind us. And we were just like, oh man, my cool points have gone down the tube. And these guys behind her, these couples, like, hey lady, put that blanket down. And she turned around in the theater and says, you shouldn't be watching an eater, young man. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. So we slid, you know, underneath the seats, and we got through the movie, and we swore never again are we going to go to a rated R movie, and never again are we going to move Mrs. Coin, you know? All right, well, what's the moral of the story is essentially she was blocking the occasion of sin. And my question is, what's your blanket? What's the thing that you put over yourself to guard yourself from sins against purity? St. Thomas said this: sensuality is best conquered by flight, not fight. All right? It means running away from near occasions of sin. The Catholic University of America, believe this or not, they returned recently. What's wrong with the microphone? Oh. Just keep going? Okay. The Catholic University of America, they were kind of scratching their heads about how to deal with the culture of hooking up in the dorms and binge drinking, and they came up with a great idea. Let's go back to single-sex dorms, and the problems went down. Can you imagine? Amazing. Using reason. Okay. And so, just prudence. Okay. Second thing is prayer. Once again, that chastity is not just a virtue that is acquired by willpower alone. It also is a fruit of the Holy Spirit and is a gift given to those who ask for it. But I think, a lot of times when you talk to people, their prayer about chastity is like St. Augustine. Do you know the story about St. Augustine? So St. Augustine, he was living in an adult, he lived with his girlfriend, and he had a kid outside of wedlock, and his mother was praying for him to get out of this situation. And in the book Confessions, he started to pray for chastity, but this was his prayer: God, give me chastity, but not yet. So, and the problem was he was looking at it as a burden. And a lot of times I think people, when they hear well, you can't do this, it's like, well, why not? It's a burden as opposed to a blessing. And it's for many. So it's a prayer. You have to ask for the grace, and Saint Augustine ultimately did ask for the grace. Saint Josemaria said this: without God's help, it is impossible to live a clean life. God wants us to be humble and to ask for His help through our mother, who is His mother. Blessed Frassati says this: I urge you with all my strength and my soul to approach the Eucharistic table as often as possible. Feed on the bread of angels, which will draw the strength to fight inner struggles. And then finally, it's also good to ask for, if there's struggles, bring it up, being sincere in confession. Just coughing it up if there's struggles there. All right. One other thing too, I just want to bring is another virtue that's lost in our society is the virtue of modesty. Okay. Does everyone know what modesty is? Okay. Modesty is the virtue whereby we are careful with the way we speak, the way we dress, and the way we present ourselves in front of people. Okay? I just think it's a lost virtue in today. And I mean, we see this, I think, too, in women's fashions today. So a lot of times at weddings, one of the rules I have, here are the strict rules, is I ask the women to cover up, okay, and put a shawl and get a wedding dress that doesn't expose too much. And they come back, and it's true, they can't find a dress anywhere that's not super revealing. The culture at large sees no problem with that. And I just think it's one of those things is, when you're dressing, or it's even sort of stuck into the guys' culture too. I told the story a couple of holidays ago. We had this priest get together, and we go casual. I don't really have a lot of what you see is what you get. You got some sports clothes, a couple cassocks, and so I didn't have casual pants. So I went to the Burlington Coat Factory and I go to get a pair of pants, and I put those suckers on, and there's like skinny jeans. I'm like, what in the world, you know? And so I went back and I got another pair, and it was like the worse than that. And he was like, so I went to the guy, I'm like, where are your pants? He says, they're right there. Do you have any normal ones? He goes, you're wearing them. I'm like, anyway, I just thought, and I've noticed even like guys, like normal guys are walking around with like these tight jeans. Like, what's wrong with you, you know? I mean, girls don't see that, you know? And it's just, so it's kind of like what used to be a girl problem is now a guy problem, you know? Anyway, it's just, we're living in a crazy culture. True? I mean, sorry. I just got a real problem with skinny jeans on. I just think it's feminine, it's terrible. All right, RJ, all right, before baptism, stop. Okay. Joking. Okay, let's cut it, let's bring it down, let's pray. All right, and next week we'll go into the 7th and 8th commandments. We can cut that out.